The story begins with a story about a fictional continent, which is full of magic and martial arts, after the World War, called the War of Self-Destruction. In the human world, where the undead raged everywhere, the brave souls learned to cultivate and develop martial arts. One of the brave souls was so powerful that she had much more significant abilities than the others. Her name was Shu Boss. Burning her soul in the name of light, she summoned something. To resist the undead and demons, which were becoming stronger day by day, she ordered a certain creature to save the fates of all the living and fight back the chaos of this world. By calling him, something came into this world. Returning to the events of real time, a certain girl shouted to the guy if he would undress. Even the crows got scared from her scream and flew away in fear. The guy was incredibly embarrassed, and he asked Ariana to stop. The impudent girl pressed him against the wall and asked him to undress. From the fact that the guy was inactive, she understood that he was not going to undress. If he did not do this, then she would undress. The hero persistently shouted for her to take her hands off her clothes and not undress. The guy's requests were not heard, and the girl took off all her clothes. She felt awkward, but incredibly wanted it. Gradually taking off her clothes, she did not say a word. The hero was embarrassed to even look at the naked girl, and he became embarrassed. Ariana screamed furiously, either he would take off his clothes now, or she would tear them off him. He became even more embarrassed, because he had never had intimacy before. The girl was unshakable, because she had already been an adult for 5 minutes. Moreover, 3 years ago she had already decided that she would marry the guy. The guy immediately thought that Ariana had tricked him into coming here for this reason, and he invited her to go to his room. Covering herself with the remains of her clothes, Ariana said that the book says that this should be here. It was in a rather unusual place, because they were at the very top, on top of an incredibly huge dragon statue. The naked lady opened the book and found where it was written, and then showed it to the guy. It was indicated there that the origins of magic are connected with the spiritual power of the magician Kuan. In order to strengthen your magic, you need to increase your Kuan. Time with a high concentration of Kuan will help with this. The closer a person is to nature, the closer to the source of origin of magic, and the more in this case, you can increase your Kuan. These words were written by Professor Haer. The naive girl pointed out that the book indicated that in order to increase Kuan, you need to combine various forms, but the guy immediately realized that her father probably brought this book in order to pick up girls. The lady fell into a stupor, because she didn't even realize that this could really be so. Her father is a great magician and priest, the wisest man. The guy also understood that her father was also very lustful. The girl was still confused and asked Leo if he knew that she was related to the dragon clan. Her mother is the daughter of the leader of the dragon clan, and the father became the partner of a huge dragon, was able to overcome the highest barrier and became a saint. Leo agreed with Ariana, because his affairs are his problem, and thanked her for her concern. But the girl was worried about something. After all, she didn't understand how they could call him that. Everything they say is true. The guy admitted that he is a failure, because even after 10 years at the academy, he was still unable to absorb the magic stone. And also, he was never able to awaken his Kuan. The girl's persistence knew no bounds, and she realized that she wouldn't do that. If he listened to her, they would be able to awaken him today. She was sure of it. The not-so-lucky guy asked Ariana to stop, because she herself understood that nothing would work. After all, she is the daughter of the great magician and the dragon. She needs to think about her honor. But Leo was also the son of Count Lofus. The girl did not understand why they were doing this what they treated him. She must make everyone open their eyes. For the kind words, Leo immediately clung to Ariana and hugged her. And then he asked her to calm down. The girl was incredibly embarrassed, because she was completely naked, and he was so close. She started crying and asking if everything would be okay, because this was her first time. He pressed her to the floor, and they continued to hug. Suddenly, the clothes that were covering the girl fell off. Leo became even more nervous and felt incredibly awkward. The boy timidly said the girl's name, thereby calling her. And unexpectedly for her, he asked if he could change his mind. The girl was furious. She shouted to the whole city that she wouldn't do this, and he couldn't change his mind. A moment later she changed her clothes, but she was still clinging to the guy. She stood next to him in love and dreamed of intimacy. Leo was a little upset, because after all, he missed his chance. Ariana came even closer to him and pressed her chest against him. And then she whispered in his ear if he really wanted it. Then tonight, he needs to come to Ariana's room. Perspiration began to flow down the guy's face even more actively. he did not know what to answer the girl. As if nothing had happened, after all that had been said, she immediately left. After all, it was necessary to return the book so that Flossus would not notice. Looking at the guy in love, she said goodbye to him. Caring Leo asked her not to forget to buy a mug of bear beer, in which case, even if he noticed, he would not cause problems for her. Ariana was such an adult, but she was still always in a hurry somewhere. Suddenly, some guy standing on the balcony heard Leo's screams. He asked Ariana to come back, because he couldn't fly. The witty boy immediately realized who was on top of the monument. Someone behind the blonde said that that same loser had not even mastered the levitation technique. It was just a shame for the Lofus family. The blue-eyed guy believed that Leo would remain a loser. But the blue-eyed blonde understood that Leo was a person who was able to run around the entire Holy Spirit Magic Academy for 6 years. Because of this, he did not consider him a failure. The guy with blue hair continued to consider Leo a failure, because in his opinion, mages did not become stronger because of running. The blonde believed that Professor Haer was simply afraid that he would take everything too personally, so he told him this nonsense. However, everything he said was a lie, because during these 6 years he never grew wiser, after which he asked the guy with blue hair if he had prepared everything. The troll in the guy's hands has already reached 2 stars, and Leo, unable to create even the most primitive magic shield without killing anyone, is no match for him. In fact, it wasn't his fault that Ariana liked Leo. The blue-eyed guy saw that Will's brotherly feelings began to awaken, and he showed weakness. In fact, he was a rival for the heir position, and Will understood this, and did not consider him his brother. Smirking evilly, he considered him just a bastard, and no match for him. At the same time, Leo tried to knock off Ariana's clothes, which she left on the statue. After several attempts, the guy managed to take off his clothes, and he began to catch them. And so, she was in his hands. It took him a lot of effort, and he was already tired. The boy was preparing to descend and understood that it would certainly be better to descend by air, but he had no other choice but to descend on his own. Suddenly, he saw something amazing. It was like an incredibly huge portal that appeared right next to him. His evil brother did it. Using a magic spell, Will summoned something. A certain creature began to emerge from the portal. First it showed its hand, but after that, it was clear that it was a giant troll who was going to finish the guy off. The surprised guy quickly began to look around and look for guards who could protect him, because he did not understand how a 2-star monster could get into the academy. With an incredible roar, the monster stepped on the monument. It has incredibly thick skin and high physical resistance, making it an easy opponent for a mage. However, Leo damn it wasn't a magician. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge fireball began to fly. He crashed into the academy tower not far from Leo. The ogre and the guy are incredibly surprised, because they saw fire magic. The hero guessed who it could be, and immediately turned in the direction from where the blow was made. Leo realized that he saw Rob and shouted at the top of his voice that he was a bastard. Rob just looked at him, smiled and prepared for the next attack. Meanwhile, the ogre was already preparing to attack Leo, and his gaze went straight to the target. The boy began to get even more nervous, because it was becoming more and more interesting. Meanwhile, the hooligans who wished him harm watched and laughed. And all this happened because an entry-level magician can easily banish a one-eyed troll, and the fact that this guy was hiding was simply ridiculous. The gloating Rob laughed and said to let Leo still give him a helping hand. After which, he began to take out his magic wand. The magic rod was also covered in fire, and with the help of it, Rob became even stronger. Suddenly, the stone in Will's hands was destroyed using fire magic. Will immediately started screaming that Rob was crazy, because he had broken the teleportation stone, and now it was impossible to send the troll back. The evil blonde began to laugh, because in order to simply intimidate him, he would not drive away the guards. The brother immediately understood what Rob wanted to do. An attempt on the life of an aristocrat is a serious crime. The impudent man patted Will on the shoulder and told him that he himself said that Leo was just a bastard, and he advised me to forget about him and go have a drink. And then he began to quickly leave. As he left, the impudent guy turned around and told Will that he had made the teleportation stone, so he knew what to do. The impudent man finally left, and Will looked at what was happening and did not understand what to do. At the same time, the ogre continued to deliver his furious attacks. With incredible efforts, Leo tried to evade them. After another incredibly powerful attack, the boy realized that it was better not to joke with the enemy. When he fully realized the situation, he quickly began to run. The enemy was not at all inferior to him in speed, and ran after him. Another attack followed using fire magic, which was aimed directly at the guy. With dexterity, the guy dodged again and continued to run. The ogre was even surprised at the dexterity of his opponent, because he clearly did not expect this from a simple guy. He was indignant that the vile ogre pestered him. The bald and blue ogre continued to attack the boy, and ran after him quite quickly. After some time, they approached the fountain. The giant ogre struggled with his fatigue, as it was incredibly difficult for him to run due to his weight. Leo realized that it was good that he had been exercising and running for a long time, otherwise he would never have stolen anything from him. The unfortunate ogre was furious. He began to scream furiously. The scream was heard throughout the academy, as if the ogre had a second wind, and he continued to run. The boy realized that things were bad, and he couldn't hide so easily. Unexpectedly, a jump followed. The ogre rose quite high above the ground, and was probably planning an attack. With the help of his giant club, he planned to smear Leo into a cake. The hero was gripped by fear, because he understood that now he would not be well. The enemy was quite clumsy, and only hit Leo on the arm. Due to the blow, his clothes were torn. This blow made the enemy even more willing to finish Leo, and with incredible fury he continued to run. Reaching out his giant blue hand, he planned to grab the hero. The guy saw this and thought about what to do next. He turned and looked straight into the ogre's eye. After which, he continued running again at even greater speed. The villain was incredibly slow, and yet still missed the guy and couldn't finish him off with his giant hand. Meanwhile, the guy, using his skills, was able to slip between the ogre's hand. The guy had a lot of impudence, and when he was a positive ogre, he ordered him to come here. Swinging his leg, he began to attack using his physical strength. The giant didn't care at all about this attack, he didn't even feel it. With the help of his tail, he wanted to show the impudent guy his true strength. And at that moment, he threw the impudent young man, who was attempting to kill the ogre, incredibly high. The young man crashed into the statue and screamed in pain. After the blow, he immediately fell to the ground, and again the scream was heard from the frantic pain. The blue ogre continued to run towards his victim. The monster seemed to do this with even greater passion, because he had already slightly crippled his victim. Leo realized that this could be the end for him now, because without Kunya, relying only on his physical abilities, he is no opponent to the monster of the second star. A few seconds later, someone started using magic. She went straight to the ogre and began to affect him. Using magical powers, someone surrounded the ogre with magic. At that moment, the ogre began to spin as if in a tornado and scream from a lack of understanding of what was happening. The magician was an elderly man with a staff in his hands. He epically began to approach the ogre's victim. A rather serious man was getting closer and closer to Leo. The guy recognized him immediately, because it was Mr. Director. With one movement of his hand, Mr. Director made the ogre suffer furiously. Using his magical abilities, he also formed a seal in which he imprisoned the monster. And he followed straight to his world using teleportation. The director looked at Leo and didn't know what to say to him, because the guy was all wounded and almost died. The elderly man just looked at him and then sighed heavily. The guy looked at the director and apologized for disappointing him. The man said that Leo had been at the academy for 5 years, but had not been able to awaken either Kuan or absorb the magic stone, and asked if it was time to give up. The guy looked at him with enthusiasm and said that he wanted to try again. The director looked straight into the eyes of the purposeful guy. And also, on his wounds, and how difficult it is for him at this academy, and nothing works out for him. The guy also did not take his eyes off the man, and looked him straight in the eyes. The wise director walked up to Leo and put his hand on his shoulder. After which, he advised him to first get medical treatment and then continue his studies. Turning around, he saw the destroyed statue. Using his magical abilities, the man began to lift huge pieces of the statue. Using his abilities, he began to repair the incredibly huge statue. Pieces of the statue's hand gradually began to attach. And after that, it was as if they had grown together. Leo looked at it and was shocked, because it was incredibly cool. When the wise man began to leave, the guy turned to him. His treatment was due to an incredibly severe hand injury. The wound began to become inflamed and required immediate treatment and hospitalization. Some time later, events took place in the Kyber Magic Academy, namely in the library. Someone was talking in the library about the hero, and at the same time I was reading a book. It was Ariana, who was sitting on the floor and studying literature, and also asking the unknown person whether Leo had read all the books in this library. This unknown person was a girl, she said that the hero has been reading one book every day for 5 years, but he is not a magician and is not capable of casting spells. However, there is no other person on the Eurasian continent who knows the theory better. What he said, the one who said it was Flossus. Ariana claimed that awakening his Kun was only a matter of time, because she had already found a way to do it. All that was needed was this. Suddenly, the girl became embarrassed, because she shouldn't say this. Flossus looked at her in surprise and asked what was the matter. The girl still felt awkward, but said that it was okay. Her whip technique had reached the 2nd level, and she asked if she should continue studying. She inherited wind magic from her father and fire magic from her mother. The whip technique will help her better control wind and fire. It is perfect for her fighting abilities. Of course, she must continue to improve this technique. However, kind Ariana would like to choose a fighting technique that she could practice with Leo. After all, they could be together. The girl wanted to always be with him. In the meantime, the question was asked to practice with me what? The question was asked by the wounded Leo, who arrived at the library. Ariana immediately began to run into his arms. The guy stood motionless. The girl noticed that he was seriously wounded. As she approached, she immediately wanted to look at the wound, because she was very worried about Leo. The mark from the monster's claws and burns from fiery magic were visible on the wound. The smart girl immediately realized that these were the tricks of Rob and Will. She was furious and was going to find them. Ariana shouted furiously that they had bothered her so damn much, and she wanted to take revenge on them. Suddenly, Leo took her hand and stopped her. The girl cried and wanted to help her lover and avenge him. Wise Flossus, meanwhile, watched what was happening and asked Leo to show his wounds. She approached and began to examine the scars that the huge monster left. The woman immediately understood what was happening and who could have left such marks. Ariana could not look at this calmly, and asked what was the matter. Flossus said that this was just external damage, and then asked the girl to bring healing water from the closet behind. As soon as the healing water took effect, the wound was immediately isolated with a bandage, and the bleeding stopped. The bandage was tied tightly, and soon it would heal soon. The guy screamed in pain, because the woman had bandaged his arm quite tightly. Caring Ariana immediately noticed that her lover was in pain. She suggested using wind magic and blowing, because then there would be no pain. Carefully, she began to blow on the wound, moving very close to it. The witty guy was embarrassed, but he said that he was still in pain. The girl looked at him tenderly and realized that the wind magic did not help. Then, it was necessary to use other magic. Ariana wanted to try a flaming kiss, and began to quickly approach Leo to help his wound heal faster. Leo felt an incredible sense of awkwardness, and even screamed because of it. He tried so hard to avoid this kiss that all the books around them were scattered and floating in the air. Flossus looked at everything that was happening, and told the two lovers that recently found books in a single copy were stacked there, and they ruined everything. The director will not pat them on the head for this. The kissed guy was shocked by what he heard, and noticed something for himself. He realized that there were books here that he had not yet read. They were lying in the cracks between the cabinets. They are so old that almost all of them were eaten away by insects. Leo was in a stupor. He was overcome by an instant desire to read these books. Looking at one of them, he noticed a very unusual cover, and I immediately realized that this was probably a book on black magic. The attentive Flossus immediately noticed what kind of book they found, and she said that they couldn't read it, and then asked to give it back. The guy was even more surprised and asked why he needed to give the book. Once upon a time, black and white magicians rallied together. They fought together against the forces of evil, but then something happened, and now she is banned. With black magic it is better not to have bodies, because it is taboo. Leo realized that this was evil magic, and memories of the past dawned on him. He remembered how he sat and people were cursing in front of him. They shouted that he was a bastard and a little monster. At this time the guy sat motionless and listened to all this. Also, they shouted that he was a degenerate of black magicians, and wanted to get rid of him. The hero cried furiously at such a difficult fate, because they wanted to get rid of him. Returning to the events in the library, Leo continued to look at the book, and thought about what to do next. Ariana was surprised, because she didn't understand why he reacted this way to black magic. The guy was overcome by a strange feeling when he held the book in his hands, as if he felt the power that he possessed. Leo touched the pentagram that was on the cover of the book. Suddenly, it glowed a bright acidic green, as if signaling that the black magician had found it. Realization struck and immediately dawned on the guy. He quickly began to reach for the book and wanted to study it from beginning to end. The magical abilities that he felt from this book, he could not compare with absolutely anything, because he had never felt this before. With the help of a scream, the girl tried to dissuade Leo from reading this book and throw it to the ground. The violent desire could not be overcome so easily, because he realized that with the help of this book he could control his magic. Having opened the book, the guy began to read its contents with incredible interest. Flossus, realizing that this could be dangerous, used her magical powers. Thus, taking the book from Leo, she pulled it towards her with the help of her own magic. Silently, she took the book in her hands, because she understood that it could be incredibly dangerous. The guy couldn't calm down and asked Flossus to let him look at the book. The girl was unshakable and did not want to allow him what was forbidden to absolutely everyone. She picked up the book and began to hide it as far as possible. With a slight movement of her hand, the girl indicated where the book should be placed. After which, in an instant, the book itself moved to the place that the girl had indicated. After what happened, the guy decided to leave the library and began to open the door. The lady started to follow him, but he said that he was wounded, so he'd better go to bed early. Flossus immediately said goodbye to him, looking the impudent man straight in the eyes. Ariana couldn't calm down and ran with Leo to follow him. The wise Flossus immediately stopped her so that she could stay and practice controlling the magical whip. The love lady was watching Leo through a small crack in the door, and she was incredibly unhappy that she had to stay in the library. Flossus closed the door in her face so that she could continue her studies. The hero looked through the glass in the door, but could not see any of the girls. Frustrated, he began to walk through the academy's courtyard and think. He was incredibly sad because he found himself alone, as if he had been abandoned. Suddenly, a bright flash of light appeared behind him, and someone said his name. A huge fireball flew towards the guy and gradually approached him. He was already incredibly close and the guy felt the heat from the flame that did not go out. Leo managed to dodge, but he still did not understand what was happening. When he turned his head, he saw a familiar character. It was Rob. He again continued to use his magical abilities, and made an attempt on Leo's life. The situation that arose made the villain just laugh. Leo turned to him and said that 3 years had already passed, but the same thing was happening, and asked if he was tired or if he was still tired. Rob was happy with everything, but he incredibly enjoyed hunting for weak Leo. The guy sighed heavily, because he was sad from the realization of the whole situation. Realizing the whole situation, the hero turned around and only wished Rob good luck. The insidious Rob was incredibly angry at the guy's action and asked him not to think that he couldn't do anything to him because of Ariana's protection, because no man could hide behind a girl. The hero continued to go his way, but turning around briefly, he said that there was nothing wrong with this, because she still liked him, and not Rob, because she hated him. The flame in the villain's eyes inflamed even stronger, and his rage increased manifold. He began to use his magical abilities to harm Leo. Flames hovered around them. The hero turned to the villain, and once again reminded him that in the academy it is forbidden to attack other students using magic. Rob didn't care, because he wanted to hurt Leo and finish him off. Fury overcame him. He incredibly wanted to do everything possible to deal a significant blow to the insolent man. Gathering all his strength into one blow, he used his magical abilities to launch a fire attack, which quickly approached Leo. Perspiration began to flow down the hero's face with even greater speed. He was incredibly worried, and did not understand what to do in this situation, because he could not defend himself because he did not have magical abilities. The fireball was right in front of him, and he realized that this could be the end of his life. After touching the fire, a bright flash of fire shone around him. Before the blow, the guy closed his eyes so as not to see anything. But when he opened it, he discovered something amazing. He found himself in a completely different place, and did not even know where he was now. Looking around, he realized that he had never seen this place before. Suddenly, he discovered an incredibly beautiful and strange girl approaching him. She flew over the ground, and with every second she was getting closer to Leo. As soon as the girl approached, she immediately sat down on a tree and greeted the guy, after which she said that the owner had finally appeared. Leo immediately started asking questions. He asked where he was and who she was. The unusual girl replied that this was a forest of black magic, and she, in turn, was the guardian of his abilities. This shocked the guy even more. He didn't understand what the forest of black magic was and how it got here. The lady thought about it and let the guy know that he would soon find out everything. And that was the main thing for her. That he had already activated the sealed power that had been lurking within him all along. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of the guy that he had never seen before. It stated that his magic power was currently 0, his physical power was 173, and his wealth was 17. The unusual lady also added that his koan was sealed for a long time. Although he awakened it, he would still have to be developed from scratch. As for his physical strength, he runs all year round, so she reached the second stage. Wealth is a supply of magic cores, now it has awakened, so after absorption they will turn into magic power. The hero looked at his hands, and suddenly the realization came to him that he could now practice magic. The lady warned him that first he needs to bring his magical power to the first stage, and after that he can cultivate it. She will teach him the technique of internal breathing. He will exercise every day and in a month he will be able to. Leo suddenly became indignant, because a whole month was too long for him, and he asked if it could be done faster. After all, at the end of the year the academy conducts tests. If he does not pass it, he will fly out of there. The girl apologized, but without her breathing techniques, an ordinary person reaches the first stage in a whole year at best, and he wanted to do it even faster. There was only one opportunity to learn faster than in a month. The guy was interested in this and wanted to find out how this was possible. The unusual lady said that this is only possible if he finds a girl for pair cultivation. If yin and yang unite, the effectiveness will increase. Leo was incredibly confused by this, and he realized that paired cultivation was something he had thought about, and he was still just a child. She didn't understand why he had such an embarrassed expression on his face, because it was just ordinary cultivation. At one point, the lady summoned her staff and wanted to show something to the guy. Magic surrounded her and she sparkled with a bright green light. Then, suddenly she pointed her staff directly at Leo and used her magic. The hero did not expect that the girl had such incredible abilities. After some time, the girl finished using magic on Leo. Smiling, she said that she taught him the technique of paired cultivation. From this moment on, he can embark on his own path of improvement. In a moment, the guy immediately moved. The girl did everything she wanted for Leo. The guy returned to the event, where Rob attacked him and was going to attack with fire abilities. At that moment, 5 fireballs were approaching him, which were incredibly close. The villain just looked at this and smiled, because he wants to harm the hero. Suddenly, Leo extended his hand to use his magic, which he had never been able to use before. Rob smiled and began to mock Leo's changed expression. At the same time, the guy was thinking that even though only the awakened Kun was not able to operate with magic, but he had to do at least something to prevent the fireball attack. When the ball came even closer, the hero was momentarily confused. But without losing hope, he continued to try to prevent the attack. Suddenly, a bright blue light appeared around him, which began to protect him from the ball fire. It was water magic. He skillfully distributed it around himself and began to use it against the attack. Rob began to shout that this was impossible. Noticeably nervous, he doubted the guy's abilities, and did not believe that this happened. Using a shield made of water, he easily prevented the fire attack without being harmed at all. The enemy furiously did not believe in what was happening, not understanding how Leo did it, because he did not have kunya. Leo, meanwhile, reflected that the book said that he passively used magic in case of danger. Finally, he understood what Kun was needed for. Although he knows the spell, he has never been able to successfully use it in a dangerous situation before. The villain was incredibly upset, because he planned to finish off the hero. He shouted that Leo was a bastard. He took out his staff and wanted to use an even stronger blow. By summoning an attack with his staff, he generated an incredibly powerful magical field, and with the help of fire he had to perform the attack. The ability used was called fire arrows. They had incredible power. The fired arrow incredibly quickly began to approach the target. I fly closer and closer. She almost arrived at Leo, and he was still standing in the water shield, waiting for the next attack. Fire arrow began to destroy the water barrier that Leo had created. When the water barrier was completely destroyed, the fire arrow began to gradually approach the hero's body. At that moment, when she came incredibly close, he did not realize what to do next, because he had never fought with magic. Ariana suddenly appeared out of nowhere, which easily used the magic whip and destroyed Rob's attack. The villain was stunned, sweat was running down his face, he understood that there was no point in continuing the fight any further. And I was also surprised at how quickly Ariana came to Leo's aid. Rob didn't want to give up and angrily ordered Ariana to get out of the way. The girl, without thinking about it for a second, came to the guy's defense, using her magic whip. And she asked what would happen if she didn't leave. Rob began to manipulate the fact that their families had an engagement agreement and sooner or later she would become his wife. Ariana didn't care about the engagement at all, because she wouldn't marry anyone but Leo. The villain visibly became even angrier, planning his next move. Sticking her tongue out, she asked what he would do to her next. After all, Rob didn't want her to tell her father that he had attacked his classmate on the academy grounds. And then, showing him the magic whip, she asked if he wanted to try it. The scoundrel stood in a stupor and could not say anything. But then, suddenly, he changed his facial expression, as if he was planning something. Then he smiled and said that he would not fight with his future wife. The girl called him a moron, because he would never become her fiancé. And she added that a new batch of poison had arrived from Kuma, and he should ask for some to try, maybe it would help. Rob had no words, he just smiled. Ariana grabbed Leo's hand, and she quickly called him to go somewhere. Rob looked at everything that was happening and thought that he would do his best to expel Leo, and he should just wait a little. Some time later, the couple arrived at the Magic Academy's dormitory. Leo smiled and said that they had already arrived. The girl knew this, but wanted to go with the guy. He suddenly stopped her and said that this was a men's dormitory and she couldn't come here. With good intention in her eyes, she looked at the guy and said that she really wanted to. The hero touched her shoulder and moved closer. And he was forced to upset her, because if he breaks the rules, he will be fined. The girl understood this, and was already incredibly upset, because she really wanted to get into Leo's room. Suddenly, the guy pulled her to him and began to hug her. The lady felt incredibly pleasant and awkward. Leo was incredibly grateful to his savior and stroked her head. After that, in upset feelings, he began to go to his dormitory, and the girl followed him with her gaze. Suddenly, the embarrassed guy turned around and asked if Ariana wanted to go with him. The lady happily replied that she wanted this very much. The guy admitted that he hadn't even finished speaking yet. A smiling Ariana said that she was ready for anything with Leo. The boy clearly did not expect such an answer from the girl in love. He smiled and told her that in that case, see you tomorrow. Ariana also smiled, because he would begin to wait patiently for tomorrow. Some time later it got dark outside. Leo sat in his room and meditated. Suddenly, the same unusual girl he had seen earlier appeared next to him. She looked at him and said that the breathing method is divided into 9 levels, in which the first level is the weakest. As the level increases, his spiritual magic power will increase. Right now, his spiritual magic power was only 0, but at the same time, he had 17 coins. The primary magic core, accumulated in his body for many years, can be converted into magic power through the absorption method. However, the girl understood that not everything was so simple. And I wondered if they didn't give 10 coins for a year of schooling, because how did he then accumulate only 17 in 5 years of schooling? The guy closed his eyes and said indignantly that he was giving the coins to Ariana. At first the unusual girl was surprised, after which she laughed, because in this case, everything was clear. Leo was indignant and said that everything was serious with them and there was no need to laugh. The extraordinary lady thought that she was the one with whom he wanted to practice sun and moon pair cultivation. The guy was embarrassed, but the girl immediately realized that this was really so. The lady ordered him to now begin to practice the breathing exercise and absorb the magical power that he had accumulated over all these years. The guy again continued to meditate and practice breathing exercises. Evolutionary cultivation is to awaken the energy flows between heaven and earth, which should enter the user's body and cause mutation. He can easily transform the energy flows into his own energy. However, first he needs to free up the basic breathing techniques. Leo, in confusion, realized that everything would not be so simple, and continued to meditate. After some period of meditation, he felt an unusual power that surrounded him. His head was filled with knowledge that he could not get anywhere before. The guy's magical power increased to 20 units, and his wealth to 12 units. The unusual lady was amazed and congratulated the guy, because he had mastered the initial stage of Kunya. Leo immediately realized that usually the magic core issued by the school increases the strength by 1, and not always, but now it has increased by 5. The lady laughed. It was all thanks to her sun and moon breathing method. This is what all the cultivators in the world want. But the main reason for his success is his special natural abilities. thanks to his talents, he was able to remove bodily restrictions. When he mastered breathing methods, he became a real cultivator. The guy immediately wondered where he could have such special natural abilities. The incredible girl said that this was all. He got it from his mother. Leo was incredibly shocked by this information, because he had no idea that this was possible. He immediately got up from the floor and asked the girl if she knew his mother. Suddenly the girl flew up and asked Leo if he had a question. Why did Kun suddenly awaken in him? Gurov thought again, because he realized that this was really not just like that. Unexpectedly, it immediately dawned on him. He remembered the very book with black magic that he opened and began to read. Holding her in his hands, he felt a connection with her that he had never felt with anything else before. Leo thought that perhaps the sorceress was his. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Someone came to Leo. This was also a surprise for the magical girl, but she was ready for it. The guy began to approach the door in order to open it. Meanwhile the sorceress was already hiding in her magical portal. Before entering the room, the sorceress had already disappeared into space. The guy opened the door, and suddenly he discovered the girl who suddenly burst straight into his room and pushed him inside. It was Ariana, who instantly rushed into Leo's arms. The boy was incredibly shocked, because he obviously didn't expect to see her here late at night. Instantly the girl closed the door with her foot. The lady didn't make a sound, but the guy kept shouting how she got here, because she was forbidden to enter here. Ariana pushed the guy right up against the wall and was incredibly persistent. The hero did not understand what was happening, because the girl began to take off his t-shirt. The girl looked into his eyes and said that she wanted to help him. She persistently insisted that she wanted to awaken Kun in him. From surprise, the guy was incredibly dumbfounded. He pushed the girl away and wanted to tell her something. After which, he pressed her against the wall, and was a little angry. In a dissatisfied tone, he said that he would stop doing this, because they had agreed. She cried and talked about how Rob would use magic on him today if she was even a second late. She was incredibly scared for the guy's fate, and that's why she was so protective and wanted to help him with Kun. Ariana trembled and cried from the helplessness of her lover. The boy began to wipe away her tears, and he told her not to worry, because he had already awakened Kun. Not believing his words, she asked if it was true, continuing to cry. Pushing him away, she shouted that he was lying, because nothing had happened between them yet. The girl did not understand how he awakened his Kun. Leo had no words, he was dumbfounded, and didn't know what to tell her. After which, he decided to demonstrate his abilities. He used his own magic. Continuing to cry, the girl still believed him, because she saw everything with her own eyes. Reaching out, she touched his palm and felt his true strength. And I realized that this was really the same Kun. Meanwhile, late at night at the Haer Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry, events took place in the library. Flossus secretly leafed through the book, which contained spells related to black magic. It stated that with the help of evil spirits, they improved their cultivation methods. Using ancient forbidden techniques, they controlled nature and had destructive power, much greater than that of white magicians. After reading this part, she immediately closed the book. Leaving it on the table, she stood up from her workplace. After which, she turned off the light. And as if nothing had happened, she began to leave, while the book was lying right on the table. Instantly, as soon as Flossus left, the book immediately activated, showing unknown magical symbols. Meanwhile, we again move on to the events that took place in Leo's room. He told her about the methods of paired cultivation. The girl said in a whisper that this greatly accelerates progress. A man and a woman can achieve yin-yang complementarity through the practice of breathing and merging the sun and moon. One must open the energy channels to increase the speed of the process and its effect. The girl began to become noticeably nervous and asked, "Is this the essence of cultivation, and isn't anything more needed?" The hero was a little surprised, but said that if she doesn't want to, then it's okay. The girl again rushed straight to Leo. She pressed herself against him and shouted that she agreed. Ariana hugged the guy tightly and said that she was ready to do anything to make Leo stronger. The boy also hugged her, and she felt even more embarrassed by what had happened. But I liked it incredibly much, and she didn't want to let him go from her embrace. It seemed that she could stand like that for days, in her arms admiring the moon. Suddenly, the girl looked straight into Leo's eyes, and thought that they really were. Unfortunately, the guy disappointed her and gave an answer, saying no. The lady objected, because they need to practice the breathing of the sun and moon. Unfortunately, Leo had been training incredibly hard today, so he wanted to start tomorrow evening. After all, tomorrow, they must go to the Lake of the Sun and Moon. The next day arrived and events continued to occur at the academy. The students had a lecture where they talked about the magic wand. This is a weapon for transmitting magical power when the students cast a spell. Usually a magic wand is made of wood. For example, pear sticks are used by evil and ancient spirits. They have resistance to negative magic. Rob raised his hand and wanted to ask a question regarding what to do if fire magic is used. Alder, also known as firewood, is often used as a material for making sticks. It can be said that alder is the most fighting among tree species. Ariana also wanted to ask a question regarding the fact that she owns the magic of fire and wind, whether she needs to change wands if she uses different elements. All students were also interested in the answer to this question, because everyone possessed only one magic. The teacher pretended not to hear the question, after which, he looked at the class again, and did not know what to answer them. At first he thought about it, because it was necessary to answer at least something. The man turned his attention to Leo, who was sitting with his eyes closed at his desk. Unsure of the answer, the man called Leo. Having said that he has already completed the general introduction to magic, he needs help answering this question. The guy wasn't even embarrassed and was ready to answer it. Suddenly Ariana screamed that Leo was already there. She stood up from her desk, but Leo immediately took her hand to stop her. After which, he politely asked her to sit down. The girl was outraged and began to cry, because she saw how Leo was being bullied. The insolent people sat at their desks and called Leo names, calling him a coward and laughing at him. Leo and Ariana remained calm, and for this they closed their eyes additionally. Indignantly, the guy asked whether Will and Rob really believed that they could expel him from the academy in this way. Will didn't stop laughing, but was surprised that Leo asked him a question. Leo also said that if he told his father about everything he did here, he was afraid that he would not only be expelled, but that he himself would come after him. The pests were incredibly angry, because they clearly did not expect to hear such an answer. But Leo asked them to calm down, because he was not going to tell him anything. Will was red as a tomato and shouted that he was not afraid of anything. The teacher decided to calm down their conflict and asked them not to swear in class anymore. Having asked not to make a mess, he continued the lesson. Sometime after the end of classes, everyone began to leave the academy. Rob and Will turned their attention to people they didn't expect to see here and now. It was Will's father and another unknown man. The impudent Will's father was called Count Rufus. He had the same blue hair as his son. The guy was incredibly happy, because it was a rather unexpected meeting when the father came to his son. Suddenly, the count drew attention to Leo, who was imposingly found near the academy. The man next to Rufus saw that he was interested in the guy. The count's comrade approached Leo and said that the venerable count wanted to meet with him. The guy clearly didn't expect this and was surprised. Count Rufus, meanwhile, was watching this and waiting for the guy to come to him. Rufus and Leo were sitting in the carriage, and the count's comrade was guarding him. The count's son, meanwhile, approached the man and became indignant. After which, suddenly pressed against him, the man was shocked. With desperation in his voice, Will shouted that it was all his fault. Meanwhile, Leo and Rufus sat opposite each other, looking into each other's eyes. The count said that after the competition at the end of the year he would buy him several more estates in other cities. After all, based on his current situation, being a rich estate owner is the best choice. Rufus didn't yet know that Leo now owned Kun, and he wanted to tell him about it. Before he could say this, father stopped him, because there was no question of him becoming a magician. After all, he is his son, and he loves him. If he does not become a war hero in distant and dangerous lands, then it will be impossible to gain social status. The boy was amused by this, and he told his father that it didn't matter whether he wanted to get him somewhere or was just testing his character for endurance, because he wanted to say something. Although from childhood he differed from other people in his inability to awaken magical power, he is still not going to give up and, therefore, voluntarily gives up everything that belongs to him. Confidently and persistently, he looked at his father and firmly said that this was his final decision. He still isn't going to give up, so he voluntarily gives up everything that belongs to him. This shocked the father. He could not believe what his son said. The hero looked at Rufus with confidence, and did not even think of conceding his point of view. The count became thoughtful and lost himself in his own thoughts. After thinking for a while, he realized that Leo really looked like his mother. The guy never knew his mother, and he was wondering what she was like. Meanwhile, Will was outraged that this was incredibly rude to him. He is the young master of the Rufus family, and he didn't understand how a simple man dared to contradict him. A moment later, unperturbed, Leo exited the carriage. Will immediately began to make claims. He shouted and asked what he and his father were discussing and what was in his hand. The hero actually had a certain scroll in his hands. It was quite huge in size. The hero decided to tease Will and asked if he could guess what was there. Unperturbed, the guy began to leave as if nothing had happened. Will shouted after him that he was a bastard and had no right to talk to him like that. The bad guy was incredibly angry. You could read this discontent on his face. Towards evening, events began to occur on the mountain behind the Magic Academy. Leo sat with Ariana near an incredibly beautiful river and mountains, and they performed rituals related to breathing. The lovers were incredibly concentrated, because joint meditation could strengthen their spirit and make them much stronger. Together they continued their meditation and spoke words in an unknown language. During meditation they were surrounded by their own magic. With the help of an aura they were surrounded by magical abilities. Gradually, they increased their magical levels through spending time together and meditating. The lady had a much higher level, because she trained a lot more, and opened Kun earlier. The level was 131, while Leo had only 20. Suddenly, the girl felt incredibly hard. She could no longer calmly continue to meditate and raise her level. Leo noticed this and immediately stopped his meditation. And the girl's level rapidly continued to rise, and was already at around 135. Lady had incredible difficulty leveling up further and seemed to no longer want to continue. The guy first simply touched her in order to support her. After which, he began to help her get to her feet to lift her spirit. Gently and tenderly, he held her close to him and hugged her tightly to make her feel better. Their magical auras of water and fire merged as they embraced. Incredibly, their level of magical power continued to increase when they hugged. The girl's level was at 138, and Leo's was already 50. Together they could achieve much greater success than if they trained separately. Ariana still couldn't go on anymore and told Leo that she was tired. The guy suggested that she go home in this case. She hugged him tighter because she didn't want to go home, because she wanted to be with him. From fatigue, Ariana began to fall asleep on her feet while the guy hugged her. When the girl fell asleep, a magical lady suddenly appeared and helped Leo improve. Although she increased her magical power by only 7 points, this process is equal to several months of hard work. The guy shouldn't worry, she's fine, she'll sleep through it and come to her senses, the magical girl said. Leo put her on the ground and gave her the opportunity to rest, because she had put an incredible amount of effort into such improvement. The unimaginable lady also congratulated him, because many masters cannot raise the level for years, but he managed it in a couple of days. The guy decided to demonstrate his abilities, how well he currently owned his own magic. Gradually, he was able to use the power of thought to control the drops of water that were above his palm. For the guy this was already a stunning blow, because he had never experienced anything like this before. But of course, he wanted much more. Suddenly, he created a huge waterspout of incredible strength, and released it straight towards the river. Even the lady was surprised, because she did not expect him to master techniques of this kind so quickly. The water column was enormous in size, and it required incredible magical abilities. Leo also learned how to crystallize water and create sharp crystals from it. There were an incredibly huge number of them, and in a matter of seconds they could hit the enemy and get stuck right in his body. With just a wave of his hand, he could create such incredible things. By focusing his magic, he could create multiple ice blocks that were incredibly sharp and aimed at only one target. With new abilities, he could aim all the ice blocks at a single target and hit it accurately. The girl and Leo were amazed, because it was really very good for a person who had mastered magic for 2 days. At this rate, he will soon reach the second stage of cultivation. Now there is not a single student in the academy whose magic power is greater than level 150, which is the second level. Even Ariana has this indicator of 138. The magic lady pointed out that with her current physical capabilities, the fusion of the sun and moon could only be practiced once a week, otherwise she would exhaust her body and mind, which could negatively affect the relationship, and besides, they did not have a magical core. Leo learned that the academy had given away all the magic cores it had been saving for several years, and now it was only releasing 3 cores per month, which was not enough. And for now, unfortunately, he couldn't practice anymore. The unusual girl, in turn, noted that there are no hopeless situations. Surprised, the guy asked what she was offering him. Heroes can go to the Wild Magic Gorge to practice their magic. This gorge is located in the region of the western mountains of another world. The area is deserted and uninhabited by people, usually only low-level monsters settle there, but sometimes there are also medium ones. Since the gorge is located far from residential settlements, it has virtually no effect on the human world. The Association of Magicians did not conduct punitive expeditions there. However, there is a barrier installed there that does not allow mages below the second stage. Magic cores are made from level 1 monsters, but if you have some basic skills, defeating a level 1 monster is not a problem. The smart guy immediately realized that with the second level core, progress was faster. The lady warned him to take into account that she was not suggesting that he fight higher level monsters. Therefore, if he is going to die, then he should not count on her. The guy had nothing to answer, but he understood everything from what the magical lady said. Meanwhile, daylight came and events continued to occur in Haer's house. The girl was lying in the bedroom, sleeping. It was Ariana. She was incredibly exhausted after yesterday's meditation. Suddenly, someone began to approach the bedroom. It was a girl with red hair who was walking straight towards the door. After which, she started knocking on the door, and she waited for someone to open it for her. Without waiting for an answer, she pulled the door handle to enter. But the door itself was still closed, and she was unable to enter. Some time later, when she made more effort, she was still able to enter the bedroom. Watching the sleeping girl, she thought about how to wake her up. The girl was indignant and told Ariana that it was time for her to get up, because a little more and she would be late. The lady instantly opened her eyes and looked at everything that surrounded her. Yawning, she said that yesterday everything really went very well. But when she realized where she was shocked that she was at home. The lady with red hair used her magical powers on Ariana, and she pulled the blanket off her so that she could get out of bed faster. The woman was immediately indignant, because if she fell asleep not at home, then where then? Ariana looked at her calmly and thought about what to answer. The lady with red hair, meanwhile, noticed that the windows were open. Turning her gaze to Ariana, she immediately asked why she slept with the windows open. Trying to figure something out, the girl wanted to find an answer to what she was asked. Looking at her awkwardness, she said that she simply forgot to close the windows. The woman with red hair continued to look at the girl indignantly. So indignant that she seemed to have discovered something. Looking at the lady again, she said that her magic power had increased. She was interested in how this happened. At the same time, events took place in the Magic Academy, namely in the library. Flossus was holding a book with black magic in her hands. It was turned with the cover down so that no one would understand what kind of book it was. The woman asked the one on the left if he really wanted to go to the Wild Magic Gorge. The guy answered in the affirmative, because he wants to try to get an entry-level magic core. The academy had produced quite a few cores in recent years, but he still couldn't absorb them. The woman knew that he was giving them to Ariana and asked if he wanted to give her even more cores. The hero responded skeptically, because he himself wanted to absorb them. Flossus was shocked because she realized that he had awakened. To confirm the above, the guy began to use his magical abilities right in the library. He made the water that was in the cup appear in the air. All the water that was in the cup began to levitate and hovered, indulging in Leo's magical skills. Looking into his eyes, I realized that he had already mastered the first stage of water magic. And yet, he came because he wanted her to help him. The guy, in turn, asked if she was interested in how he woke up. The woman answered emotionlessly that she was absolutely not interested. She thought about whether he really wanted to tell this so badly, but she wasn't interested at all. The hero immediately felt awkward, because he didn't understand why the woman wasn't interested. He wanted to go to the gorge to get magic cores and become stronger. This method was bad because he had only reached the first level. Even the weakest level 1 monster would be a difficult opponent for him. After the woman's words, the guy immediately thought about what she told him. He picked up the kettle that was on the fire. Then he showed politeness by pouring hot water for the woman. He casually added that he understood, but he had plans to get a mid-level core. Flossus was shocked and began to get nervous. Her hand immediately began to shake as the guy poured water into the cup. Some time later, events continued to occur in the mountains behind the academy. Leo was training with his new sword that his father had given him. Flossus began to train him, and ordered him to increase his physical strength, and choose military equipment for cultivation. Ariana, for example, practices the whip technique. Over all these years he has already strengthened his base, so his strength has reached the second stage. However, his magical power had just awakened. Therefore, Leo needs to learn water flow sword cultivation as it will be the best choice. The guy accepted all of the above and began training to improve his sword skills. Incredibly hard, he began to train, and combined physical activity with the help of sword attacks, and the magical properties of water magic, which he combined with strikes. The water flow sword, like water, can take on different forms. It looks quite easy, but in fact it trains his flexibility, agility, speed and control abilities. Gradually, he trained his sword skills, but initially he was unable to change the shape of the sword using water magic. Thanks to his efforts, his results improved with each attack. The better his understanding of water magic, the greater his chances of creating a good sword. After all, if there is water, then there is a sword. The sword and water are one. With persistence, he continued to study the basics of magic and the sword. Even all the animals in the forest that were next to him gathered to look at how he handled the sword. Some time later, events took place in the men's dormitory of the academy. Ariana walked down the corridor, heading to Leo's room. When she approached his room, she began knocking on the door. She came because she wanted to bring him breakfast and surprise him. But I didn't open it anyway, because Leo wasn't at home. The lady decided to press against the door to listen to what was happening inside and to understand whether the guy was there. Suddenly, a stranger approached the girl and asked what she was doing here. Ariana was seized with panic. She did not even understand what to answer the man, because she was not here legally. This was the director of the academy, the wizard Haer, and also Ariana's father. The girl still didn't understand what to say or answer to him. She seemed dumbfounded. The man was dissatisfied with her behavior, and believed that her mother spoiled her too much, because she completely forgot about the rules. Perspiration flowed down the girl's face, and all she could say was that she was 18 years old. The man objected and said that she was already 18, but she still has not overcome the second stage. Her magic power is much higher than that of other students, and she has very little time left until she reaches the second stage. The father had nothing more to add, and he closed his eyes. Then he turned and simply began to leave. The man continued to walk away, and the girl just looked after him. Suddenly he turned around and asked why she was standing there, telling her to follow him. The lady didn't quite understand what he wanted, but agreed, and she ran after her father, not understanding what was happening. They headed together to the wizard Haer's office. Ariana and Haer entered the spacious office because the director wanted to talk to her. The director asked with a dry smile what indicator her magic power had reached. With awkwardness, the lady replied that her indicator was at the level of 138. Haer didn't quite understand how she managed to lift him up so quickly. Ariana was indignant, because he had just scolded her for her slow progress. The man began to look in his office for something unusual that was lying on one of the shelves. When he saw what he needed, he began to reach for this thing with his hand. The girl continued to look at what was happening, but did not yet understand what was happening. Entry-level magic cores from the academy are mediocre. The father handed his daughter a mid-level core. One such core increases magical power by 20 points. It will help her break through to the second stage. Struck by her father's good nature, the girl was incredibly happy. She gladly accepted such a useful gift. After all, these cores were incredibly effective and valuable in this world. Smiling, the daughter asked her father to give her a couple more mid-level cores. Haer got angry because of such a request, and said that even one thing was too much for her, and she needed to cope with the cultivation herself. The generous man pointed the girl to the door and hinted that now it was time for her to go out. Pressing the mid-level core to her chest, she said that since he was angry with her, then let him be angry to the end, otherwise it looked like he was going through menopause. The angry father watched as his daughter left the office with an incredibly valuable crystal. He then said that she was already 18 after the test competition, and at the end of the year her engagement to Rob would be discussed. The unfortunate lady did not want this at all, because she only loved Leo. Meanwhile, Leo was returning from training, and gradually approached the academy. He was already right next to her. A few more minutes and he would have approached the office he needed. He deftly jumped over rocks and stones, jumping over ponds and obstacles. Thanks to his perfect physical fitness and strength, this was not difficult for him. Jumping several meters was achieved with incredible ease. Suddenly, he discovered something on Earth. After which, a feeling of danger dawned on him. Someone threw a magic net at the hero, which was aimed at immobilizing him. Not understanding what was happening, the guy stood there like a stop and couldn't do anything about it. The net covered him. From the weight of the magical threads and mesh, he immediately fell to the ground and was in pain. Enemies approached him, who threw a magical net over him. The scoundrels rejoiced, because the operation was useless, no matter how strong he was, and no matter what fighting skills he possessed, he still could not get out of the network woven by the magic silkworm. Leo was indignant and objected that the villains should have gotten tired of this by now, because they behaved like little children. This only made Rob laugh, and he began to adjust his monocle. The two impudent people did not consider themselves children at all, because they took their actions quite seriously and justifiably. Using magical powers, they lifted Leo above the ground and tied him to a tree. Finding this funny, they also told him that they would not kill him today and laughed loudly. They thought it would be funny if he hung here for a few days, and if they did not forget, they would let him go for some time. There are no monsters in the vicinity of the academy, but animals may appear here at night, so Leo had to be careful. The scoundrels left Leo alone, tied to a tree in nets. They felt absolutely no pity, they just laughed. Suddenly, the guy began to use his magical abilities. The villains behind them heard something, and they were a little surprised. They turned to see what was happening behind them. It was Leo, who had freed himself from the net, and was standing with a sword in his hands. Rob was shocked because no one had ever been able to cut a silkworm's net before. This was not difficult for Leo, because he learned a new sword technique using magic. Will immediately realized that this was not an easy sword, and it ended up in Leo's hands for a reason. He was overcome with anger when he learned that his father had given him this sword. Without denying it, the hero added that father said that this was the precious heritage of the Lofus family. With a smile, the guy also said that he didn't need the sword, but his father insisted, because a father's love is difficult to reject. He recalled how he and his father sat in the carriage, and the count said that he was becoming more and more like his mother. After which, he handed him a package with a snake sword. If he becomes a magician, then it will become his weapon, but if not, then he needs to ask Flossus for the technique of wielding a sword, because learning to simply wield it is also not bad. The guy accepted his father's gift without hesitation, holding it out into his hands. When he opened the package, he discovered a sword of incredible beauty, and it was of an unusual shape. This made Will incredibly angry, because he wanted to be his father's favorite. Because of strong anger, he asked to give him the sword, because he considered it his own. Rob, meanwhile, realized that this was not so, because even with a sword he would not be able to cut the network. Leo just smiled at the words of the self-confident villain. Swinging his sword again, he continued to cut the silk threads that were woven by the silkworm. Jumping incredibly high, he prepared to attack. Using his magical powers and sword, he shouted, "What if?" He is proficient in sword techniques and swung directly at his opponents. Rob ordered to be careful and was going to use his magic. With the help of fire, he created a kind of shield with which he wanted to protect himself from a sword attack. Leo's agility was much more developed, and he had already prepared a water shield, with which he avoided the fire attack. After another swing of the sword, the thing was crushed. The destroyed thing shattered into many small blue fragments. The villain stood in front of them and was completely immobilized. Rob was seized with panic, because he did not know how to fight further with such an opponent. Will continued to stand motionless, sweat running down his face, and he was incredibly nervous. This is all because Will's pride was broken, because Leo's sword was pointed straight at the scoundrel's face. The villain was shaking with fear, he did not know what to say to a threat of this kind. Suddenly, something started leaking from Will's pants. Something flowed more and more abundantly, and there was already a small puddle under his feet. Incredibly, the guy peed himself out of fear, because he thought that death was now awaiting him. Leo found this situation incredibly funny, because he did not expect such a reaction. The guy could no longer contain his laughter, and began to laugh incredibly loudly, because he could not believe that this happened. After all, he just intimidated him a little, and he peed himself. This threat was not so serious for this. Will hated his so-called brother even more after this. Rob, meanwhile, started clapping for him. It was incredible, because in just a few days, the loser learned to fight back. Leo objected, because the enemy was also incredible, he didn't even try to use magic against him. Nasty Rob thought it was a waste of time because he didn't want to kill Leo now. The indignant guy asked why he didn't want to finish him off now, because he always wanted to. The villain laughed again at his statement. He despised him, however, it is not profitable for him to kill Leo, it is much better to humiliate him in the competition so that Ariana can see who the real hero is. The guy was amused by this answer and said that he would look at it at the competition. As if nothing had happened, he began to leave for the academy. Some time later, night fell and events continued in the academy dormitory, namely in Leo's room. The hero was meditating again, there were many bubbles of water around him, and he was completely focused on strengthening his skills. With every second he felt the strengthening of his magical abilities, and he could control them in incredibly sophisticated ways, and create incredible figures out of water. Without the magical core, Kun cannot be increased, only breathing techniques can help the guy now, the magical girl said. The persistent boy began to call on the power of water. His abilities improved so much that he was able to create water spheres, and with high-class skill to control the water flows around you. The magic lady did not understand what the guy was up to. It was written in the book that in order to maximize your abilities during battle, you need to become one with them. Magic depends on you and the method. To control magic, you must first learn to control yourself. Masterfully, he continued to control the water flows around him, dividing them into small particles of water. Calmly and with precision, he continued to use his abilities and control them with light hand movements. Continuing to control them, something suddenly happened. The guy began to be pierced by incredible pain that appeared out of nowhere. From the pain, he first began to cough, not understanding what was happening. Well, after a few seconds, he couldn't even take a breath, and began to choke. The magic lady immediately rushed to his aid, because she understood that this could be incredibly dangerous. The girl was getting closer and closer and asked him to stop, because it was dangerous to stop. The guy felt that he had almost broken through and wanted to continue. The magical lady could not stop him, and simply watched what was happening. It was as if the guy began to be torn into small pieces, gradually and not immediately. Realizing the situation, the girl used her magic wand to cast magic on Leo and save him. The hero continued to experience pain, but did not want to stop. The lady tried to stop him, and waved her magic wand to help him stop. And then, she had to use magic directly on his head. Leo stopped, sweat began to flow down his face, it was incredibly difficult for him to finish the meditation and interrupt, he looked at the rod as if possessed. After a moment, he felt relief, he felt much better. Progress must be gradual and cannot be rushed. After all, if he loses control, he will only harm his body and soul. In his frustrated feelings, Leo realized that his Kun was still too weak, and apparently, he will have to go to the Wild Gorge a little earlier. Some time later, events continued at the academy. The students again had a lesson with the teacher. Ariana was gnawing at the thought that Leo couldn't just ask for time off. How could he not come to class without telling her anything? Suddenly, the teacher called Ariana, and he told her to answer the question he had just asked. The girl didn't even know what question was asked, because all her thoughts were occupied by Leo. Meanwhile, events took place in the vicinity of the academy. Leo studied the map and didn't quite understand how to navigate it. After all, when he reached his destination, there was nothing further. Sighing heavily, he realized that he needed to fold the map and continue searching on his own. Pay attention to the objects near him, he began to walk further. Behind him, green eyes suddenly appeared, looking straight at their prey. It was a wolf-like creature that was watching its prey. The wolf wanted to attack Leo and finish him off so he could eat. Saliva flowed from the wolf's mouth, he wanted flesh, Leo's flesh. Gradually, the predator began to approach its prey, but did it incredibly quietly. Leo still felt some danger and decided to turn around. As soon as he started to turn his head, the wolf immediately rushed at him from his spot. The giant wolf was ready to tear Leo to pieces, and was incredibly close.